want to say up front that I still don't know what to make of this. It's been almost 2 years and I've told this story exactly 3 times out loud. Once to my sister, once to a therapist, and once to a cop who wrote it down but never called me back. I'm typing it out now because I think if I don't get it out of my head, it's just going to sit there forever. My name's Megan. I was 29 at the time, working nights in the ICU at a hospital outside Asheville, North Carolina. If you've never done shift work, I'll just tell you, it wrecks you in ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't done it. Your body forgets what time it is. You start eating breakfast at 7 p.m. So every few months, I take a long weekend and drive up into Pisgah National Forest just to remember what daylight felt like. I'd been to Davidson River Campground a handful of times before, always with my ex, Tyler, back when we were together. After we split, I decided I wasn't going to let that ruin camping for me, so in October of 2023, I booked myself a site. Just me, no dog, no friends, nothing. Site 34, if you're curious, back in the loop near the tree line, close enough to hear the river but far enough that you couldn't see it through the brush. I got there on a Thursday afternoon. It was that kind of October where the air still smells like summer during the day, but drops fast once the sun starts going down, and by 5 it was already sweatshirt weather. I set up my tent. I've had the same 2-person REI tent since college, orange and gray. Got a fire going, and just sat there with a paperback and a 6-pack, feeling pretty good about my life for the first time in a while. The site next to mine, 35, was empty when I got there. Around 6:30, while I was cooking a foil packet of vegetables over the fire, a truck pulled in. Older Ford, faded maroon, one of those trucks that's been through a couple of decades of weather. A guy got out, maybe mid-40s, medium build, wearing a flannel and a ball cap pulled low. He had a single duffel bag and what looked like a rolled-up tarp. No cooler that I could see. No tent that I noticed him setting up, though I wasn't really watching. He gave me a nod when he saw me. I gave one back. That's just camping etiquette. You acknowledge the person 40 feet away, and then you both go back to minding your business. I didn't think anything of it. It got dark around 7:15. I want to be specific about the time because I checked my phone a lot that night, which I don't normally do when I camp. Usually the whole point is to not look at my phone. But something about that first night had me checking it more than usual, and I didn't clock why until later. Around 8:40, I heard him on a phone call. Voices carry weird out there, especially once the wind picks up along the river, so I only caught pieces. He was talking low, almost a mutter, and then his voice would spike for a second, not yelling, just sharper, and then drop again. I heard the word tomorrow a few times. I heard him say, "She doesn't know" once, clear as anything, and then nothing else made sense after that. I told myself it was none of my business. People have weird phone calls at campsites all the time. Divorces, work drama, whatever. I went to bed around 10. Zipped the tent, did my normal routine, flashlight by my head, phone on airplane mode to save the battery since I didn't have signal out there anyway, boots inside the tent vestibule so nothing would crawl into them overnight. The first thing that woke me up was the cold. Not dangerous cold, just tent at altitude in October cold, the kind that gets into your feet no matter how good your sleeping bag is. I checked my phone, 1:52 a.m. I lay there for a minute just trying to warm up, and that's when I heard footsteps. Not on the trail, not on the gravel loop road. In the leaves, close, moving slow. The kind of slow that isn't someone walking to the bathroom. A person walking normally in leaves has a rhythm to it. Heel toe, fairly even. This wasn't that. This was long pauses between steps. Step, long pause. Like someone testing the ground, or like someone who didn't want to be heard and hadn't quite figured out that stopping between steps doesn't actually make you quieter, it just makes it creepier. I lay completely still. My heart was going, but I told myself it was probably him, Site 35, going to relieve himself in the woods instead of walking to the vault toilet, which gross, but not sinister. The steps got closer to my tent, not toward the tree line, toward me. Then they stopped. I want to say they stopped maybe 8-10 feet from my tent, somewhere around where my rainfly meets the guy line on the passenger side, if that makes sense, behind where my head was. And then nothing. No steps going away either. Just silence, except the river. I did not move for what felt like 20 minutes, but was probably 5. I finally worked up the nerve to unzip the tiniest slit in the mesh window by my head, maybe 2 inches, and look out. There was nothing there. No shape, no shadow, no glow of a phone screen. Just the dark shape of the trees, and past them, the outline of his truck, still parked at Site 35. I told myself an animal had probably startled, and I'd caught the tail end of it circling back into the brush. That's what I told myself. I didn't sleep again that night. Not really. I dozed in that shallow, twitchy way where you're aware of every sound your sleeping bag makes when you shift. In the morning, everything felt normal again, the way it does. Sun was out, birds were going, and when I unzipped my tent around 8, the guy from 35 was sitting at his picnic table eating something out of a can, and he waved, he said. I laughed it off, said something like, "Yeah, I don't sleep great the first night out." He nodded like that made sense and went back to his can of whatever it was. I want to be clear that at this point, I still didn't think anything was actually wrong. I've camped alone a bunch of times, and you get used to your brain doing this thing at night where every sound becomes a threat. I've heard a deer sound exactly like a person walking. I've heard a chipmunk on dry leaves sound like footsteps 6 feet from my head. So Friday, I mostly just enjoyed the day. Hiked out to Looking Glass Falls, which was maybe 15 minutes away, ate a sandwich on a rock, came back around 4. His truck was gone when I got back. I remember feeling this little wash of relief that I didn't examine too closely at the time. I made dinner, read my book, went to bed around 9:45, earlier than the night before because the hike had worn me out. I woke up at 2:13 a.m. I know the exact time because it's burned into me. What woke me up wasn't a sound this time. It was light. A thin bar of white light moving across the inside of my tent wall, low, like it was coming from close to the ground and sweeping slowly, the way you'd move a flashlight if you were looking for something under a car or looking for the bottom seam of it. I froze. The light passed over the wall by my feet, held there a second, then moved and swept back the other way, twice. Then it clicked off. Then I heard the zipper. Not my zipper. Not literally his. I don't know that for a fact, but a tent zipper at Site 35 going down slow in that stuttering way zippers do when someone's trying to be quiet with them and failing, because a zipper only has one speed that's actually quiet, and it's not slow. It's smooth and even. I lay there gripping my phone like it was a weapon, which is stupid. A phone isn't a weapon, but it was the only thing in reach. I didn't hear footsteps after the zipper. I didn't hear anything else at all for maybe 10 minutes. Then, faintly, I heard what I can only describe as someone breathing hard, like after exertion. Not close, more like it was coming from somewhere in the trees off to my left, away from his sight entirely, away from the direction a bathroom trip would take you. I did not sleep the rest of that night. At first light, I broke camp faster than I've ever broken camp in my life. I didn't make coffee, I didn't eat. I threw everything in the car in about 11 minutes, and I did not look towards Site 35 while I did it. Though I could see out of the corner of my eye that his truck was back, parked crooked, like he'd pulled in late and hadn't bothered to straighten it out. As I was loading my lunk, he came around the side of his truck. He wasn't in a flannel this time, just a plain gray t-shirt, and there was something on the front of it, low, near the hem. Dark, irregular, maybe 6 inches across. Could have been oil, could have been dirt. I want to be honest that I don't actually know what it was, and that's part of what still gets to me. In the daylight from 30 feet away, in October, in the woods, a dark stain on gray cotton could be 100 things. I said something like, "Yeah, I gotta get back for work," which was a lie. I didn't work again until Sunday night. He looked at me, not a long look, maybe 2 seconds, and said, "Didn't mean to spook you last night. Went looking for my dog." I hadn't heard a dog bark once in 2 nights. Not from his sight, not from anywhere in the loop. I said something like, "Oh, no worries," got in my car, and left. I did not look in my rearview mirror until I was out of the loop road and back on 276, and when I finally did, there was nothing behind me. No truck. Nothing. Here's the part that still bothers me the most, and it's not even the flashlight or the footsteps. When I got home that Saturday afternoon, I unpacked my car in my driveway, and my rainfly, the outer layer of my tent, had a tear in it along the bottom hem, on the side that had faced his sight. Maybe 8 inches long, cleanish, not the kind of tear you get from a branch or from packing it wrong. My gear is old. I'd used that rainfly probably 30 times and never had so much as a snag. I called the ranger station on Monday, mostly because my sister told me I should, at least to have it on record. The woman who answered was nice enough, but there wasn't really anything to report. No theft, no injury, nobody had touched me. "Sounds like you had a scare," is basically what she said, not unkindly. I understood. What was she going to do, run the plate on a guy for going to check on a lost dog at 2 a.m.? I looked up Davidson River Campground incident reports out of morbid curiosity a few months later. You can find some of that stuff through local news archives and forums, and I didn't find anything that matched. No missing persons from that weekend. No reports of assault in the area. As far as the internet is concerned, nothing happened at all in October 2023 at that campground, which I guess should make me feel better, and it doesn't, really. I went back to Pisgah exactly once after that, almost a year later, with my sister and her husband, and I made sure we booked a site nowhere near Loop D. I still camp. I actually camp more than I used to, if I'm honest, because I refuse to let 2 nights turn into a phobia. But I don't camp alone anymore, and I don't sleep facing the tent wall anymore either. I always sleep facing the door now, no matter how uncomfortable the angle is, because some part of my brain decided a long time ago that I need to see it coming if it comes. I never did find out what that stain on his shirt was. I never found out why the light moved the way it did, low and searching, like it was checking the ground and not the trees. And I never figured out what he could have been breathing hard about, off in a direction that had nothing to do with a dog on a leash. I know how this sounds. I know nothing happened is the honest technical truth of it. Nobody touched me, nothing was stolen, I drove home safe. But I also know what it felt like lying there at 2:13 in the morning listening to that zipper come down. And I know that not everything that happens to you leaves a mark you can point to and say, see, this is proof. Sometimes it just leaves you sleeping facing the door for the rest of your life, and you never really get an explanation, and you learn to live with that. Story 2. The man who kept checking on us. I'm going to try to keep this one straightforward, because when I've told it to people before, I get the sense they think I'm exaggerating parts to make it scarier. I promise I'm not. If anything, I've left stuff out because it sounds too small to matter, and it's the small stuff that still keeps me up sometimes. My name is Danny. I'm 36. I drive for a regional freight company out of Grand Junction, Colorado, and in August of 2024, my wife Priya and I took our son Wyatt, who was 8 at the time, out to do some dispersed camping off Forest Road, 501 near Ruedi Reservoir, up in the White River National Forest. We'd done car camping at established campgrounds before, but this was our first real attempt at dispersed camping. No bathrooms, no host, no neighbors, unless you count other campers who happen to pick a spot near you, which mostly nobody does because the whole point of going dispersed is spacing yourself. We found a pull-off about 2 miles up a gravel forest road, a flat clearing with a fire ring somebody had built out of stacked stones, maybe a quarter mile from the nearest other vehicle we'd passed setting up. Aspens on one side, a drop-off toward the reservoir on the other. Priya said it felt like something out of a postcard, and for the first day and a half, it was. We got there Friday around 2 p.m., set up the tent, got Wyatt settled with his little pop-up shade and his coloring books, and just enjoyed being somewhere with no cell signal and nothing to do but exist. That evening around 6:30, a truck came up the road, white, unmarked, no visible logo, and slowed as it passed our sight. The guy inside, older, maybe 60, wearing a green button-up shirt and a ball cap, gave a little wave through the windshield and kept going. I figured Forest Service, or maybe just a local checking the road conditions. Didn't think about it again. Saturday morning, around 9, the same truck came back down the road, slower this time, and stopped. The man got out. He introduced himself. I'm not going to use his actual name because I never actually confirmed it was real, but he told us it was Carl, and he said he was a volunteer camp host for the district, doing rounds to make sure people had their fire permits and weren't dumping gray water near the reservoir. He seemed fine. A little talkative, the way older guys who live alone sometimes are. He asked Wyatt about his coloring book, told us there'd been a black bear sighting up toward the ridge a few weeks back, gave us his number written on a torn piece of paper in case we needed anything, and then left. Priya joked afterward that he seemed lonely more than anything. He came back Saturday afternoon, around 2 p.m., same truck, same green shirt. This time he didn't get out right away. He just parked across the road from our site and sat there for a minute before rolling his window down and asking if we'd seen any strangers on foot come through. We hadn't. He nodded slowly, like that answer worried him rather than reassured him, and then drove off. That's the first moment I remember feeling something shift, just slightly. Not fear yet. More like, you know when someone asks you a question that's technically normal, but the way they ask it doesn't sit right? It was that. He came a third time Saturday, around 6:45 p.m., right as we were starting dinner. This time on foot, walking up from somewhere down the road, no truck in sight. He said his truck was having some trouble and he was walking his usual loop anyway. He stood at the edge of our site for a while, not sitting, not leaving, just standing near the tree line with his hands in his pockets, and watched Wyatt eat a hot dog off a stick like it was the most interesting thing he'd seen all week. I offered him a plate. He said no, but thank you, and then he said something that stuck with me since. You've got a good little family here. I said something polite back, and he left on foot, back down the road, in the direction his truck's. I want to be clear that up to this point I still wasn't scared. Uneasy, maybe. Priya said later that night, once Wyatt was asleep, that something about him bugged her, but neither of us could point to what exactly. A guy checking on campers 3 times in one day is a lot, but it's not nothing. It's a guy being overly friendly or bored or lonely. We told ourselves that. We went to bed around 9:30, Wyatt in the middle of the tent, Priya and me on either side, which was our normal setup for trips like this. I woke up at 11:47 p.m. to the sound of gravel crunching, Slow, the kind of slow you use when you don't want gravel to crunch loud. I lay still and listened. The sound moved along what I was pretty sure was the edge of our clearing, near where we'd parked the truck, and then stopped. I unzipped the tent slow enough that the zipper barely made a sound and looked out. There was a shape near our truck. Not moving, just standing, facing it, maybe 15 feet from the front bumper. Too dark to make out details. I said, "Hey," not loud, more like I was testing whether it would react. It didn't move for a second. Then it turned, slow, unhurried, like it wasn't startled at all, like it had known exactly where I was the whole time, and walked off into the trees, away from the road, deeper into the woods, not toward wherever Carl's truck would have been parked. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Around 2 a.m. I heard something scrape against the side of our truck, low, metal on metal, brief, and then nothing. I checked in the morning and there was a long thin scratch along the driver's door, fresh, paint curled at the edges, at almost exactly the height a key would hit if someone ran it along the door at a slow, deliberate walk. Sunday morning we packed up faster than planned. I told Priya we should just head out a day early, and she didn't argue. While we were loading the truck, Carl's white truck came up the road one more time, the 4th time in under 20 hours, and stopped near our site. He got out and said he'd heard something moving around out here last night from his place, which he told us was about a mile down, though he'd never specified where exactly that was, and no house or cabin was visible anywhere in that direction that we'd seen in 2 days of driving the road. I told him we were fine, just heading out early. He looked at the scratch on my truck door. I hadn't pointed it out. He just looked right at it and said, "Huh." Then he wished us safe travels and left. I called the White River National Forest District office 2 days later once we had signal again and asked about a volunteer camp host named Carl working the Route 80 Reservoir dispersed sites. The woman I spoke to checked and told me they didn't have any volunteer camp hosts assigned to that road, and that dispersed camping areas out there generally didn't have hosts at all. That program was mostly run out of the developed campgrounds closer to the reservoir itself, miles from where we'd been. I want to tell you I have a satisfying end to this, but I don't. We never saw the white truck again. We never went back to that stretch of road. Wyatt, who's 10 now, still asks sometimes if we can go back to the campsite with the nice old man who gave us his number, because he was too young to pick up on any of what unsettled Priya and me, and we've never told him the rest. I still have the piece on it. I tried calling it once, about a month afterward, mostly out of some need to close the loop in my head. It rang 4 times, and then a recording came on saying the number was no longer in service. The scratch on the truck door is still there. I never got it fixed. Priya asked me once why, and I didn't really have a good answer for her beyond that some part of me didn't want to erase the only physical proof that any of it happened, even though a scratch on the truck door doesn't prove anything to anyone but us. What bothers me most isn't the shape by the truck or the scratch, or even the fact that Carl apparently didn't exist in any official capacity. It's that last look he gave the door before he drove off, like he already knew it'd be there before I said a word. I think about that a lot longer than I think about the rest of it. Story 3. He sounded exactly like Colt. I've gone back and forth for 2 years on whether to write this down anywhere. Part of me thinks putting it into words makes it more real, and I'm not sure I want that. But it's been sitting in me long enough that I think I need to get it out, even if nobody believes the parts that don't have a good explanation. I'm Jasmine. I was 21 in the summer of 2023, going into my senior year at Central Michigan. Every August, before school started back up, a group of us would do one last trip together. That year it was me, my boyfriend Colt, my roommate Bree, and Bree's on and off boyfriend Marcus. We picked Baxter Bridge Campground along the Pine River in Manistee National Forest, mostly because Marcus had done the canoe trip down the Pine before and wouldn't shut up about how good it was. We got there on a Wednesday, which worked out well because midweek in late August the campground was maybe a third full. A handful of families, a couple of older guys who looked like they're to fish and not much else, and us. We set up 2 tents going and spent the first night doing what you'd expect. A little too much drinking, a lot of talking, Marcus insisting he could start a fire without a lighter, and taking 45 minutes to prove he was wrong. Somewhere around midnight that first night, I noticed a guy sitting alone at a picnic table 2 sites down, close enough that firelight from ours reached him a little. He wasn't doing anything. No fire of his own, no phone light, no cooler I could see. Just sitting there. I mentioned it to Bree, and she looked over and said, maybe he's waiting on people. And we didn't think much more of it. People camp alone. People sit at picnic tables at midnight for all kinds of reasons. Thursday was the canoe. We got in around 10 a.m. and spent most of the day on the water. It was genuinely a great day. One of those days you remember as purely good before everything else happened. We got back to camp around 5, exhausted and sunburned, and made dinner. I noticed the guy from the night before was gone. His site looked untouched, like nobody had actually set anything up there at all. No tent, no gear, nothing to suggest he'd stayed the night, even though I was sure I'd seen him sitting there for at least an hour. That night, around 11:15, Colt said he was going to walk to the vault toilet, which was maybe a 2-minute walk down a gravel path toward the entrance of the loop. I kept talking with Bree and Marcus around the fire. Maybe 8 minutes later, I heard Colt's voice from somewhere off in the dark, past the edge of the firelight, saying my name. Just that, just calling for me, the way he did when he wanted me to come look at something. I remember standing up automatically, the way you do when someone you love says your name, and Bree asked where I was going, and I said, "Colt's calling me," and started toward the sound. It came again, closer this time, from off to my left, away from the direction of the bathroom. "Jazz!" Same voice, his cadence even. Colt has this thing where he draws out the first word of a sentence just slightly, and whoever this was did it too, exactly right. And that's the part that still gets me, because that's not a thing you fake by accident. That's a thing you'd have to know. I actually took maybe 6 or 7 steps toward the tree line before something in me, I don't know what, some instinct that hadn't caught up to my body yet, made me stop. And there was a pause, just a beat too long, and then the voice said, "Yeah, over here," from a slightly different spot than before, further into the trees, off the path entirely. Colt actually walked back into camp from the direction of the bathroom about 90 seconds after that, completely normal, holding his phone flashlight, asking why Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. Marcus had heard the voice too, from the fire, and had already started walking toward the tree line to go get me before Colt showed up and confused everyone further. We stood there for looking at each other, doing the math out loud. Colt had been at the bathroom the whole time. He'd run into one of the older guys from the fishing site on the way, and they talked for a couple minutes, which was why he took longer than usual. He had not called my name. He had not been in the trees, and yet I'd heard his voice. His specific voice, twice, calling me by the nickname only he uses, in a direction that had nothing to do with where he actually was. Bree wanted to pack up right then. Marcus, to his credit, walked the tree line with a flashlight for a few minutes and found nothing. No footprints he could make out in the dry August dirt, no broken branches, nothing. We ended up staying, mostly because it was almost midnight and none of us wanted to break camp and drive back roads in the dark. And because by the time 20 minutes had passed, we'd half convinced ourselves it had to be some kind of weird acoustic trick, sound bouncing off the river, somebody else's radio, something. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in the tent next to Colt with my hand on his arm the whole time, like I needed to keep proving to myself he was actually there. Friday during the day was quiet, too quiet in a way. We were all a little on edge, talking less, sticking closer together than we normally would. Around 4 p.m., walking back from the river, I saw the guy from Wednesday night again, sitting at the same picnic table, same posture, hands folded in front of him. This time, I got a medium height, maybe 35 to 45, nothing distinctive about his face that I could describe well even right afterward, which bothers me. You'd think if you looked at someone's face twice, you could describe it, and I really can't. What I remember clearly is that he was looking directly at our site, not at anything else, just watching. And when I made eye contact, he didn't look away. He just kept watching for another second or two and then turned his head, unhurried, like he decided on his own that he was done looking. I told the others. We agreed to keep the fire going all night and take turns staying up, which sounds paranoid typing it out now, but at the time felt like the only reasonable decision available to us. Around 1:40 a.m. on my watch, I heard footsteps on the gravel path, the same path Colt had used to reach the bathroom. Slow, deliberate, coming from the direction of that picnic table toward our site. I woke Marcus up. We both stood at the edge of the firelight and watched the dark where the path curved, and the footsteps got to maybe 30 feet away and stopped completely. We stood there for probably 5 minutes without either of us saying a word, just watching that spot in the dark. Nothing came out of it. Eventually, the footsteps started again, but moving away this time, back down the path unhurried, until we couldn't hear them at all. We left Saturday morning, a day early. Nobody argued about it this time. I looked into it afterward. I'm the type who needs to at least try to find an explanation, even a bad one. Manistee National Forest does have some history of reported voice mimicry type stories on hiking forums, mostly attributed to fishers or owls, which can apparently produce sounds that fool people at a distance. I read a few of those threads, hoping they'd make me feel better. They didn't, mostly because none of the descriptions matched what I actually heard. A fisher doesn't know your boyfriend's nickname for you. A fisher doesn't call out twice, adjust the second time when you don't come right away, and get the cadence of a real human voice exactly right down to the way he drags out his... Colt and I broke up about 8 months later for reasons that had nothing to do with any of this, or at least I don't think they did. But even after, when I'd see him around campus, I'd sometimes catch myself flinching a little if I heard someone call out Jazz from somewhere I couldn't immediately see, before my brain caught up and told me it was just someone else, Some other person with a similar voice, calling some other jazz, in a normal, unremarkable world where things like that happen all the time. I never did find out who the man at the picnic table was, or if he had anything to do with the voice at all. I want to be honest that I can't actually connect those two things with any certainty. They just happened during the same 48 hours in the same small stretch of forest, and my brain has never been able to fully separate them since. I don't have a better ending than that either. I've just learned to live with not having one. Story 4. Paradise Campground. I've moved twice since this happened, and I still check my locks 3 times before bed. I know how that sounds. I used to be the guy who made fun of my mom for doing exactly that. I don't anymore. My name's Ray. I'm 32, and at the time, June of 2025, I was working night shift at a distribution warehouse outside Eugene, Oregon. The kind of job where you clock out at 6 a.m. and the sun's already up and mocking you on your way home. I've been doing that shift for about a year and a half, and it does something to your head after a while. This constant sense of being out of sync with everyone you know. So when I got 4 days off in a row that June, I decided to do something I hadn't done since I was a kid. Pack up my old Subaru and go camp alone up along the McKenzie River at Paradise Campground, about 40 minutes east of Blue River. I got there on a Monday afternoon, which meant the campground was mostly empty. Maybe 6 or 7 other sites occupied out of, I think, over 60. I picked a spot close to the river, tucked back a little from the loop road, trees thick enough on one side that I had real privacy, which at the time felt like the whole point. The first night was uneventful in the best way. I fished a little, made a bad dinner over the fire, went to bed early because 11 years of night shift means my body still doesn't fully understand what camping bedtime is supposed to feel like. I slept fine. Tuesday, McKenzie River Trail, got back to camp around 4 p.m. and immediately felt like something was off before I could even say what. It took me a minute standing there to place it. My cooler, which I'd left latched and sitting flush against the picnic table leg that morning, was now sitting about 2 feet away from the table, still latched, contents undisturbed as far as I could tell. Not knocked over, not raided, just moved. My first thought was a bear, but bears don't gently relocate a cooler 2 feet and leave it upright and latched. My second thought was that I was misremembering where I'd left it, which is the kind of thing you tell yourself because the alternative is worse. That night, around 10:40, I heard someone on the loop road, walking slow, and I saw a flashlight beam sweep briefly across the trees near my site and then click off. I figured it was another camper looking for a spot or heading to the restroom, and I didn't think much of it until I realized the beam had come from the direction of the empty sites past mine, the unoccupied end of the loop. Not from any site that actually had people in it. Wednesday morning, I found a second thing out of place. One of my hiking boots, which I'd left by the tent door the night before, had been moved about 10 feet, sitting upright at the base of a tree at the edge of the clearing, laces still tied the way I'd left them. Just relocated. Deliberately, it seemed like, given that it was standing up straight instead of knocked over or dragged. That's when the unease really set in. I walked the site perimeter looking for tracks and found a partial boot print in a soft patch of dirt behind my tent, on the side facing the woods, a spot I had no reason to walk through myself. I'm not a tracker. I couldn't tell you much about it beyond that it existed and it wasn't mine. I debated packing up right then. I didn't, mostly out of stubbornness and a refusal to let some prankster ruin the only days off I'd get for weeks. I did move my tent, though, closer to the road, more in view of the other occupied sites, which in hindsight probably should have told me how seriously I was actually taking it, even while telling myself I wasn't. Wednesday night, I stayed up later than usual, sitting by the fire with a knife I don't even, just holding it, feeling stupid and justified at the same time. Around 12:30 a.m., I heard something at the tree line. Not footsteps, more like fabric brushing against branches, slow and deliberate. I stood up and shone my flashlight toward the sound and caught, for maybe half a second, a pale shape low to the ground at about knee height that resolved into nothing by the time my eyes adjusted. Could have been a rock, could have been an animal, could have been a person crouched down. I genuinely don't know. I stood there with the light pointed at that spot for probably 3 full minutes, and nothing moved again. I went into my tent after that but didn't sleep. Around 2:13 a.m., I remember because I'd been staring at my phone forever waiting for time to pass. I heard someone breathing outside the tent wall, close, maybe a foot or two away, on the side that faced the woods. Slow, deliberate breaths, the kind you'd take if you were trying to control your breathing rather than just breathing normally. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just lay there gripping that stupid knife until, after what felt like 10 minutes but was probably closer to 2, the breathing stopped and I heard something drag away through the underbrush, slow, unhurried, like whoever or whatever it was had all the time in the world. I left at first light Thursday, 3 days into a trip I'd planned for 5. Coffee. I threw everything in the trunk of the Subaru in under 15 minutes, and as I was pulling out of the site, I looked toward the tree line one more time, and for just a second, I thought I saw the pale shape again, further back this time, near where the trees got thick, gone before I could be sure of anything about it. I want to tell you that's the end of it, that I drove home, put it behind me, and that was that. That's not what happened, and this is the part I have the hardest time getting anyone to believe. I live in a duplex on the west side of Eugene. I got home around 9 a.m. Thursday, exhausted, wired, and slept most of the day. That night, working my normal shift, I didn't think about the campground at all. The warehouse is loud and bright and about as far from those woods as you can get mentally. I got home around 6:40 a.m. Friday, and there was a boot print in the dirt strip along the side of my duplex, under my bedroom window, fresh enough that the edges were still crisp in dirt that hadn't been disturbed by anything in the weeks I'd lived there. I told myself it could have been anyone, a delivery guy, a neighbor's kid, my landlord checking something. I wanted very badly to believe that. But the print was in a spot nobody has a reason to walk, tucked behind an AC unit and a run of blackberry bushes, directly below the one window in my apartment that doesn't have a working lock. Something I'd meant to fix for months. I fixed it that day. I also, for the first time since college, bought a chain lock for my front door, and I started sleeping with my phone flashlight within reach the way I used to at that campsite. Nothing else happened after that, not that I can point to directly. No more moved objects, no more breathing outside a wall, nothing concrete enough to call the police about, which I did try, briefly, describing a boot print under my own window, to an officer who very reasonably asked if I had any reason to believe it was connected to a camping trip 40 minutes outside city limits 3 days earlier. I didn't have an answer that made me sound like anything other than paranoid, so I let it go. I've thought about this a lot in the years since, about whether the cooler, the boot, the shape in the trees, the breathing, and the print under my window were all one continuous thing, someone who followed me from a campground back into my actual life, or whether some of it, maybe most of it, has a boring explanation I'll just never land on, and the rest is coincidence stacked on top of a few very bad, very tired nights. What I can't get past is the boot print. Everything at the campsite, I can almost talk myself into a stranger with a bad sense of humor, an animal, my own exhaustion playing tricks. But a fresh print in a spot at my own home that nobody has a reason to stand, under the one window I hadn't gotten around to locking. The same week I came back from those woods. I don't have a version of that story that lets me sleep easy. I still camp sometimes, never alone anymore, and never at Paradise Campground again. I still work nights, still come home at odd hours to a quiet street, and there are mornings, more than I'd like to admit, where I find myself checking that strip of dirt under my window before I even unlock my own front door, half expecting and half dreading that one day there'll be something there again. That's all 4 stories for this one. If you camp, even just car camping, even just a couple times a summer, I think there's a reason these kinds of stories get under people's skin more than most. Out there, you don't have locked doors. You don't have neighbors on the other side of a wall. You've got a thin sheet of nylon between you and whatever's out in the dark. And most nights, that's more than enough. Most nights. If any of these felt a little too close to something you've experienced yourself, I'd genuinely like to hear about it. Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of the best stories on this channel started as a comment on a video just like this. If you're new here, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. I put out new true horror stories regularly, and you don't want to miss the next one. And if this video kept you company tonight, hit like. It genuinely helps the channel more than you'd think. Stay safe out there. Check your tent zipper twice. And maybe don't camp alone for a while. I'll see you in the next one.